Gage, Richard Gage. Thank you. AIA.
Thank you. Test, test, test.
Not working.
Well, let's get rocking and rolling then. Thank you guys for being willing to consider the extremely difficult subjects that we're taking on today. This particular project has been one of the most difficult of my career, and of course not difficult in terms of reaching conclusions, as you'll see, but difficult in terms of the implications of those conclusions and finding people open-minded and willing, like yourself, to take a square look at what's going on here. So my commitment to you tonight is to speak the truth and to leave you with extremely valuable information that you will be able to use. I hope you'll come away with a new sense of what is conspiracy and what is science. But don't believe me. We're not looking for believers here, as you've heard from the other speakers. Check out every fact you hear, because it's extremely important that we understand all about 9/11 and its inception. After all, it was the pretext for the invasion of two countries in which already over 1 million have perished, as well as the loss of many of our hard-won civil liberties that we used to cherish here in the United States, as well as instituting abhorrent practices like extraordinary rendition, torture. 9/11 was the pretext for the ensuing global war on terror and a host of other ills that we're suffering from still as a nation that remains intact if we sweep the truth about 9/11 under the rug. So only the truth about 9/11, in fact, will stop another 9/11 attack from happening again. So it's imperative that we peer into this painful part of our recent history and re-examine the relatively new physical evidence that we've not seen in the mainstream media or from our government, of course. As one of our mentors, Joe Princiota, points out, to identify the perpetrator, first know the crime. So we look at the crime scene today. Interestingly, a poll by Scripps Howard Ohio University finds that 16% of Americans believe the Twin Towers were brought down by explosive controlled demolition. Let's do our own poll. My guess is these numbers will be pretty high in this crowd. But how many, well, let's work it backwards. How many of us believe pretty much the official story? Nobody's going to bite you. The jet planes hit the towers, and we have a large ignition of jet fuel, office fires, structural weakening by fire, and the buildings come down due to that set of events and a gravitational collapse. Anybody at all? Thank you.
Only kidding.
Oh, okay. It's a unique crowd. Is anybody unsure? Maybe somebody's unsure. Okay, so thank you. Is that two?
No.
Oh, one. Thank you. Two. That's great. Enver, thank you. And how many believe they were brought down by controlled demolition? The rest of you. You have to vote. I'm going to assume that you voted. I'll ask you again in a moment. What?
Engineered destruction.
What about engineered destruction?
Oh, just another concept.
Thank you. Well, NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, claims that they found no evidence for explosive demolition of the towers. Later, they acknowledged that they never looked for it. How can you find what you were not looking for, in fact? It's pretty darn difficult. I believe that NIST has not done their job. They say that the Twin Towers were brought down by jet planes and fires. I believe the evidence will demonstrate today that they were brought down by explosive controlled demolition. And I'll show you why I believe that. We'll take an hour just to summarize this evidence, and more of this evidence can be found, of course, in our 2-hour DVD, which is available in the back, of course, for you. I'm speaking to you today because I'm called to do just that. I care very much about our country. I care very much about our hard-won and too easily lost civil liberties. And I care about you. So if after all, if these buildings were brought down by explosives, and we've not been told, of course, the truth about this event. And the official story is a fabrication. And we have extremely serious problems in our country then that obviously pre-existed 9/11 and must be addressed with great urgency. So I hope that you'll join us in creating a profound groundswell of demand for a real investigation. Let's take a look and start by noting that we use the scientific method and in Western society. We ask a question, we do background research, we construct a hypothesis, our best guess. How did the towers come down? Was it fire-induced collapse hypothesis or controlled demolition? We test that with experiments, we analyze the results, draw conclusions, and if the hypothesis is corroborated, we report it in an open, transparent manner. If it's not, we go back and we come up with a new hypothesis that is consistent with the available data, the experiments, etc. So what we're going to show you how NIST did not use the scientific method very successfully, and we're going to take a second look at it. Let's gather some data in our effort to find out how this collapse actually happened. We'll take a look by doing some background research on other forces that have destroyed buildings, such as controlled demolitions. And we have a whole set of data, in fact, that we'll be going through about how typical controlled demolitions work. After all, this is the most common method of bringing down high-rises. And we have hundreds of examples from all across the country from which to make this comparison, because it's the most commonly used method to bring down high-rises. So they can be engineered in many different ways. Typically, a large building like this is demolished by placing thousands of cutter charges throughout the columns and beams in the building then, and then detonating them in a very precise order. The purpose is to remove a structure while avoiding damage to adjacent buildings and to do so economically. We progress outward and upward with these detonation charges, synchronistically timed floor by floor. Destroying the interior columns allows the unsupported weight of the building to pull the exterior inward and control the demolition. And destroying the building from the ground up allows you to harness the weight of the building to do much of the destruction. So the result is an implosion, like you see here, producing a symmetrical free fall acceleration into a consolidated rubble pile where it's broken up and ready for loading and shipment. Now this is a feat that only a handful of companies in the United States can accomplish. Here's another example of a controlled demolition. Curiously, this particular one happened on 9/11 in the afternoon. What happened? We'll take a look at that in a moment. Typical controlled demolitions start with a sudden onset of destruction at the base of the structure. And they involve a straight down symmetrical collapse into their own footprints, typically, because demolition waves remove the column supports. This results in a nearly free fall acceleration of the building straight down through the path of what was the greatest resistance, the thousands of tons of structural steel in that building designed to keep it together. And this can also result in the dismemberment of the steel structure. It's ready for loading and shipment then, resulting in minimal damage to adjacent structures. And of course, there's witnesses that hear sounds of explosions. There's witnesses that see flashes of light quite often. Enormous clouds of pulverized concrete is usually intact. And sometimes we have explosive charges that go off maybe at the wrong times. And it's pretty clear it's explosive. And of course, we have chemical evidence left behind in the debris. If you have all of these, this is pretty much direct evidence of explosive demolition. Interesting thing is fire can't create any one of these, really, let alone all 10 of them. So if we have this direct evidence, we know that fire didn't do that to a building. But with additional supporting documentation like government paperwork, expert corroboration, they agree, yeah, it's a controlled demolition. Foreknowledge, these are planned months in advance. You don't just do this in an afternoon, for instance. All of this is corroborating evidence and proof, really, beyond a reasonable doubt, of explosive controlled demolition. Let's take a look and see if any of that happens for Building 7. Now, most people have never heard of Building 7. Is there anybody here who has not heard of Building 7? And so we have a 47-story skyscraper, a football field in length away from the North Tower, easily the tallest building in most of our states. This wasn't hit by an airplane, so it's going to be a very interesting isolated case for us to examine because of the way it goes down. A plane didn't cause it, for instance. 5:20 in the afternoon, this building standing when the north and south towers went down, it received some damage from minor debris. In fact, that damage